Thank you very much, Rick. It's great to be back. Although I have been back for a while, I got here Friday and have been here ever since, traveling around the state, doing a little Groundhog Day, just sort of reminding myself of days of yesteryear, and traveling all the way from northwest Iowa all the way down to Davenport and southeast Iowa and everywhere in between. So it's been a fun few days, and it's great to be invited here. I want to thank you for your invitation to come here and to speak with you and talk about a very, very important subject in America, energy. As Rick mentioned, energy was a very, very big part of our campaign back in 2012. It is even more so today. I mean, just look at the impact of lower energy prices on America and the American psyche. Look at the polling today, and really nothing has happened in the economy that would cause Americans to feel much better and hopeful and optimistic about the future of our country, except for the fact that gasoline prices have come way down. And energy is such an important part of everybody's lives. We take it for granted, but when we get good quality, low cost, reliable energy, that makes Americans feel a little better. They have a little bit more spending money, and they have a little bit more optimism. And just think of all the other benefits, and I'll talk about that in a little bit in the future. One of the other reasons I love to come here in particular, because it's an opportunity to talk about a very important issue for the country. I know that agriculture accounts for about 33% of the GDP of the state of Iowa. What most people don't know is that agriculture is the #1 industry in my home state, Pennsylvania. Everybody thinks of manufacturing and all the other things that go on in Pennsylvania, but agriculture is king. And if you look, in fact, in most states in the country, agriculture is either #1 or in the top 2 or 3 of almost every other state. And so I think it's important that we address this issue. Everybody always talks about, well, Iowa's a little different because agriculture is so important, and in a presidential election, people talk more about ag than they should. They don't realize the tremendous importance of agriculture for our country and across our country, not just in the state of Iowa. And for me, it's important to understand that those who want to run for higher office should be willing to step forward and talk about these issues. My little background on agriculture: I served 10 years on the Ag Committee. I was the first senator from Pennsylvania in 100 years to serve on the Ag Committee. And I did so because I looked at the economy of my state and I realized the tremendous potential of agriculture. As I traveled my state when I first ran for office, I was just amazed at all the technology that was beginning to be used in agriculture. And obviously, coming here to Iowa and seeing the amazing technological revolution that is taking place in agriculture. Obviously, this particular arena, the energy sector, has been a leading edge in that technology growth, but it is quite impressive. One of the things I have to tell you before coming here and learning more about this industry is there's obviously a lot of myths and a lot of misinformation that has been out there for a very long time about this industry. And one of the things that blew me away when I came here is, #1, the dispelling of those myths, but also to see the kind of tremendous technological advances that are taking place within the energy sector, which with whether it's ethanol or cellulosic or ethanol or biodiesel, but also the spin-off products that are coming, all the other chemical and natural processes that are going to come to create more opportunities for economic growth here in America. That's an exciting thing. It's something that, again, I don't want to be your PR people, but you have a tremendous opportunity in the renewable fuels industry to talk about not just what you're doing to produce fuel here, but the tremendous spin-offs that are going to come. They're going to be benefits for consumers in a whole lots of other areas. And that's why I find it a little remarkable. I know you invited me here, but I was also informed that I think every other person who was there over the weekend was invited to come here. And I'm the only one that's here. And I don't want to point that out, other than the fact that I'm not too sure everybody else recognizes because they haven't spent the time here, they haven't understood, and you know, I've been to ethanol plants, Ray Deffenbaugh's plant down in West Burlington, toured other facilities across the state, and I've gotten to understand that ethanol is a very efficient way of producing energy. It provides 67% more energy than it takes to produce. That is a very efficient process. And I will tell you, and you probably know this, but as I travel around the country and I do town hall meetings, and people ask me about my support for RFF and for other renewable programs, they say to me, well, it costs more to produce it than it does to make it, right? It costs more. You know what I'm saying. It's not an energy efficient way of producing energy, and that may have been one time the case. I don't know, but that's still out there, and I think you have to understand we all have a job to do in communicating to the public the efficiency that has been developed here, the fact that it's now almost 3 gallons a bushel for ethanol production, all the other types of utilization that you're having for these byproducts, all the other tremendous advances that are being made. You have an important job to do to get that out there, and candidly, this is one of the reasons I suspect that maybe not so many people showed up on the Republican side, is because that misinformation is still there. Well, I'm very proud to be here today to hopefully set the record straight, say that it's important for our country to have competition in the marketplace. When you have a vertically integrated oil industry, it's important that we make sure that other types of competitive products are allowed into that stream. And that's what the RFF is there to do. Secondly, it's environmentally better. I come from Pennsylvania. We have non-attainment areas in the state of Pennsylvania, a lot of other areas. The fact that ethanol is used as an oxygenate to reduce smog, to improve air quality, it's a positive thing for the environment, not just in those non-attainment areas, but as you know, it's now ethanol is being used all over the country, and it improves the quality of air in our country. That's a good thing. So it's pro-competition, the RFF, it's pro-environmental, and finally, it's pro-jobs. These jobs are created here in the United States. It's important that we have good processing, manufacturing, other types of all these spin-off industries that we've talked about. It's important to have those jobs reliably located here in the United States of America. So having this industry here in the breadbasket of our country, not dependent on the whims of foreign oil and conflicts, which, given the situation that we've seen over the past few years in this administration, we're seeing more and more conflicts in that area of the world, and I suspect, unfortunately, in the next 2 years, things are not going to get better. I know we have low global prices for oil right now, but a flare-up and a conflict in any one of those countries that are big oil-producing countries will change that dramatically, as well as hopefully a rebound of the international economy. So having a stable source of energy here in the United States, far from any type of national security threat, is a very important part of our energy future, and that important part about keeping stable, low energy prices. I know you don't like the low part, but from the standpoint of workers in America, that's important. One of the things I talked about a lot during the 2012 campaign, and have just in our speech at the summit have really focused even more attention on, is the importance of having an economic platform that really focuses on creating opportunity for those who are being left behind in America today. We see it. We see stagnating wages. We see median income in this country is going down. And workers in America are not feeling like they have the real opportunity to participate in the American dream. I think one of the most important parts of that is creating opportunity for manufacturing and processing jobs to be created here in the United States, and in many cases be brought back from other countries to be located here. And I said 4 years ago, I'll say it again today, that one of the most important things we can do in bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States and providing a long-term stable future for those jobs is to have reliable energy prices in America. And low energy prices are key for manufacturing because manufacturers, as we all know, use a tremendous amount of energy in producing products. So we have to lower taxes on manufacturing and processing here in America because we want to make sure that we are competitive with the rest of the world in that area. And unfortunately, we look at manufacturing and processing here in America the way we look at every other industry in America, and it's not the same. You know, Target competes with Walmart. Cracker Barrel competes with Chili's. One bank competes with another. We have all of these industries in America who compete against each other, and that's all well and good, and so a level playing field makes sense. But when you're a manufacturer, you don't compete against the guy down the street. You compete against China, you compete against Mexico, you compete against other countries. And so we need to look at manufacturing and processing very differently. And that's why we have to develop a tax code, regulatory code that competes with all of these other countries that we have to compete against. And so that's why I talk about the importance of this whole combination of energy, taxes, regulation, and creating an environment where the 70% of Americans, 70% of Americans who don't have a college degree can have an opportunity to get good paying jobs and to rise in society. And I would make the argument again that your industry not only provides those jobs, which you do, but also creates an opportunity for other jobs to be created that can restore the American dream for millions of Americans who right now are feeling left out. So I wanted to come by here today to thank you for what you're doing, encourage you to be more vocal in blowing your own horn about what you're accomplishing and how you're accomplishing it. This is a high-tech industry. I know people think of high-tech industry as the Silicon Valley or Boston and all these other places or the Research Triangle. This is a high-tech industry. It's a high-tech industry that has tremendous potential, not just for providing our energy needs, but for a whole host of other products that make us less dependent on other countries for our goods that we consume here in the United States. So I encourage you to be bold, not be defensive. I know a lot of folks go up and talk about the RFF and say, well, it's just corporate welfare. And at the same time, go back to Washington, D.C. and vote for rum subsidies for Puerto Rico. And then criticize a standard that, as I mentioned, is pro-competition, pro-environment, and pro-American jobs. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be shy about in stepping forward and saying we have something that is good here in the heartland of America, that is employing people in rural America. You want to talk about over the past 40 or 50 years where people have been suffering the most. I can tell you in my state, the areas that have the highest chronic unemployment are rural counties. Look at population trends. Where are people moving to? Well, they're moving to the cities. Why? Because you think people like living there? No, that's where more jobs are created. That's where the higher income jobs are created. You're creating jobs in an area where jobs are precious and high wages are scarce. Don't be ashamed of standing up and saying we're doing something good for the heartland of America, for decent, hardworking people who live near and off the land. That's a good thing for America. That's a good thing for not just rural America, but for all of America. So I want to thank you for what you're doing. I want to encourage you to be bold. And I want to encourage you to try to get some other folks who may have passed on your invitation to come here and talk to you in the future. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take a few questions.
If you could make your way to a microphone, please, the center.
Warren Pitcher, an investor in Lincoln Way Energy in Nevada. I was at the summit Saturday. Since you undoubtedly know Senator Boxer from California, about a week ago, she proposed, I think it was an amendment attached to the Keystone Pipeline. Now, as I understand, California burns an awful lot of ethanol because I think they've got air problems. Can you give me any insight what Barbara Boxer's thinking about?
Well, I think that's a question far above anybody's pay grade, what Barbara Boxer's ever thinking about. Senator Boxer and I have had some famous bouts on the floor of the United States Senate on a whole variety of different issues. I don't understand what she was trying to accomplish. As I said before, there are certain perceptions out there. And I think I said so in my speech, but I would reiterate it more pointedly. It's very important for this industry to get their message out there in a stronger way. And that's why, I'll be honest with you, I'm somewhat disappointed that more of my potential colleagues, if you will, potential in that I haven't made any decision and they haven't either, aren't here to talk to you. I think that's not a good thing. And I think that probably is evidence of some of the concern that some of these potential candidates have on this issue area. And I think a lot of it is just misinformation. And I think it's really important that this industry continue. And I know I'm not saying people aren't trying. I know, I see the effort that's being made, but a lot of work needs to be done. And I think Iowa has a tremendous opportunity because of what's going to happen here in the next year and, next year, has an opportunity to do some educating. And so I would really encourage you all to take advantage of the fact that you're going to have leaders of potential leaders of the country and current leaders of the country coming to Iowa. I would encourage you to engage them and educate them and show them what you're doing. Sit down and lay out the technology and the importance of this, all of the things that I talked about. I will tell you, before I came to Iowa, I knew a little bit. I sat on the Ag Committee for 10 years, but it's really important for people to see it, touch it, understand it. So I would very much encourage you to take that challenge, and whether they're Democrats or Republicans, to engage them in understanding your industry. And that's not necessarily they're going to agree with everything. You certainly understand that. Everybody has their own perspective, but at least they'll have knowledge and won't perpetuate things that undermine support for this industry in the country. Yes, sir.
Hi, Derek Winkle from Ankeny, Iowa. Thank you for coming today, Senator.
Thank you.
You're a Republican. Wondering if you had any insight on why some of your fellow Republicans continue to say that biodiesel doesn't deserve a blender's tax credit, and also continue to contend that petroleum does not receive special tax treatment.
I can't speak for them. I'm not going to try to defend what they say or why they say it. I mean, you'd have to ask them why they say it. I believe that we should have a tax system that is as simple as possible, that we should have an income tax that allows for reasonable cost of business expenses, to make sure that we have an accurate understanding in the tax code as to what, quote, profit is. There are things in the tax code we have all over the place that are important for example, we have obviously an incentive for buying health care. We have an incentive for buying houses. We have all sorts of incentives for things that we think are public goods. Should we keep those to a minimum that are important? Yes, we should. Should we have, and so I think maybe that's the point. They're saying, well, we should keep these to a minimum. But you can't say we don't want any, because we do, and because certain things are important. The key is that we shouldn't have anything in there that favors one company over another, that is doing things that promote something that isn't economically viable. And I think that gets back to the point that I made earlier, which I think there's a misunderstanding about the viability of some of these technologies that are being used. And that's where the industry has to step forward and show that path forward. So I suspect, I said I wasn't going to answer what they were thinking, but there I did. I suspect that's what they're probably thinking.
Peter Shernian from here in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm an independent reporter. Thanks for coming, Senator.
Pleasure.
My question pertains to the question of influence. And obviously, at some point, you became, I wouldn't say changed your mind, but you became aware of what's happening and the importance of what's happening. So the question then is, what kind of conversation do we need to have with your former fellow colleagues in the Senate and Congress to influence them, to make them understand? Is it a money conversation, or is it the passionate stories that talk about what is going on here, or a combination of both?
I don't know what you mean by money conversation. Hopefully you're not talking about brown bags being brought to Congress.
Taxes.
Okay. No, the conversation, you're talking about financial benefits to the tax. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, that's certainly not unimportant. But I think making the case, as I mentioned before, the economic viability and the importance of it to the country, all the things that I listed, are all the things that you need to go through and explain, all of the different benefits and the tremendous technological advances that are occurring every day to continue to improve the cost of production, the byproducts that are being used, and the value of those byproducts. It's not a food versus fuel issue. I think people are seeing that now. I mean, you've seen markets change dramatically, and of course, ethanol production hasn't changed dramatically. And so, I mean, a lot of those things are sort of playing themselves out. A lot of the myths are sort of being dispelled by simply market conditions as we go forward, as we've seen in the last few years. But that doesn't mean people are necessarily paying attention or have thought of it in those contexts. And so it's really important to sort of lay that out as to all of these things going on. I guarantee you that most members of Congress who don't come from a state where renewable fuels is particularly important haven't spent 10 minutes on it. They just don't know. And so it's very easy to fall into, things that are the myths or rumors that are out there that they have no idea whether they're true or not, but they just accept them as fact. So it's not just important to have your advocates in the states that you are active in, but to make sure that others are informed beyond that. And some of that is public advertising and public campaigns, and hopefully some of it is also very focused on policy leaders.
We have time for one more question.
Good morning, Senator. I'm Paul Gorman from North Mankato, Minnesota, and followed all the campaigns closely in 11 and 12, and I didn't recall your being a big advocate of renewable fuels at the time, and I'm just curious to have you share your personal, maybe your personal path toward the awareness you have today, how that came about and when.
Well, if you look at the 2012 campaign, as Rick said earlier, we were in favor of the RFF and renewable fuels, and we did talk about energy a lot, and that being a part of it. I'll be happy to show you some campaign literature from 2012 where I talk about my support for it. So I don't know what else I can say other than the fact that I did admit that before I came out here and learned more about it, that I was not as enthusiastic. Although I will say that while I did some battles when I was in the Senate, my complaint was, candidly, was a subsidy and a mandate. To me, was you got to pick. And that was my point back when I was in the United States Senate, that you can't do both. And now you don't have both. And we're in a position where the mandate, as I laid out, I thought is a reasonable approach. I think other Republicans, including George Bush, have felt that way. And that if the industry is mature enough, then the tax subsidies probably should go away. And that was my position 10 years ago, and it hasn't changed. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
All right, just a couple of housekeeping